Good morning, everybody. Donna here. I wanted to continue our conversation from my last episode about where to find the best doctors to treat your migraine or any other headache condition that you may have and maybe suffering from, even if you're not fully aware of the best places to go for that help. So, if you want details about how I found my doctor and really my lifeline, you need to see the last episode. Um, and today, before I continue on that conversation, I want to talk a little bit about my last week or so. I am recovering from strep throat. I had a terrible strep throat last week. Excuse me. And I had no voice. It was in terrible, terrible pain. I wish I could have reached down and grabbed my tonsils out with my hands and pulled them out up through my mouth because that seemed like it would have been less painful than actually having the strep throat. Um, but as I am relearning my body and the body that I am in now and how it relates to my migraines, this is the first time I had strep throat without a sinus infection, but it started to come on last weekend, and I felt like you know that feeling that you have in like your throat or your nose or whatever it is before you actually get sick, that just icky feeling, and you just know there's no way to avoid it. I had that, but I also had a lot of like, I don't want to say pain, but like a feeling inside my forehead, like cloudiness, maybe a little lightheaded. It didn't feel quite right, and I couldn't pinpoint what it was. I knew it wasn't a migraine or really the beginnings of one or the pressure that sometimes I get in lieu of a migraine when it's going to rain or something because I am numb from the Botox. Um, so I couldn't really figure it out. And then, that combined with my icky throat, I was like, oh, maybe I'm just getting sick. So I decided to take a decongestant to see if that would help my head. For the first time in the history of the world, it actually did, because that's exactly what it was. My head was getting congested. I was getting sick. That was not this past Saturday, the Saturday before. And by Monday, I was in urgent care. So it really was surprising to me because when my chronic migraines were at their worst, even when I got a sinus infection, of course, it's just magnitude the pain in my head. But I even, I'm sorry, I lost my whole train of thought. I still couldn't tell what part of my head pain was from the sinus infection and what part was just from my regular everyday life with my chronic migraines. And now I'm able to tell. Now, it's important to note that I've been getting Botox for 6 years to treat my chronic migraines. And even in that time when I had sinus infections, even like maybe in the last year, if I had a sinus infection, I still couldn't tell the difference between sinus infection pain and chronic migraine pain. And I mean, part of it might have been how bad my sinus infection is, but I think this really is an example of how far my head has come in terms of healing itself, in terms of really getting what it needs in terms of treatment. And it was a really exciting moment for me. As sick as I was about to feel and shitty, that had nothing to do with anything, but it was really, really a relief to be able to just be sick, if that sounds crazy. Regular sick, like everyday average person, not somebody with a chronic invisible illness sick. And I reveled in that a little bit. When you have a chronic illness, you have to take your wins when you can get them. And for me, this was a win. As sick as that sounds. The other thing, with chronic illness, and every stage of your recovery and ebbs and flows, you're going to find that different activities and different scenarios treat you differently. You can be chronically sick and still be happy and feel things. And I guess what I'm really trying to say is Sorry, I lost my entire train of thought right there. Is that the length, the amount of how chronically sick you are changes. And I'm still learning everything that I need to know about my new body, my new circumstances, and give myself really a break, And so for me, taking a decongestant and just needing a decongestant and not an anti-inflammatory, that was a win for me. That being said, it's supposed to pour this whole week in New York City, which is fantastic. My nose has already begun running, as it were, so I could feel the pressure changes in the air. Actually, my body can, at least. And so I don't have high hopes for my head this week, but I'm going to be optimistic. I'm just really grateful that I have the tools that I need to combat a week that might be very troublesome for my head. I'm on a new anti-inflammatory. The one I normally take has a national shortage, so no updates on that. I've been trying to refill that prescription for like 3 months. But luckily, the new anti-inflammatory is in the same family, and that seems to really be doing wonders for me. Saturday night, this past Saturday night, was really rough. I was running on very low sleep. I had done a lot of things, and by the time I got to bed, I felt my head pound. It was supposed to rain, but it didn't, and whatever. But the importance of having the right tools all begins with having the right doctor. And so in my last episode, I mentioned I had emailed my neurologist because I had Googled like headache centers and headache clinics in the area and trying to figure out how many there are actually in the country, because I know when I first started my journey to find the neurologist that I needed rather, there really wasn't that much information, and there were very few headache clinic centers in the area, in the New York State area, and even in the country that specialized in this. So when I did the research for these episodes, I wasn't really finding clear answers. And so I emailed her because I trust her. If I trust her with my health, I can trust her with your health. And so I wanted to read some of the notes I took from her email to me so that maybe you guys, if you're still struggling and need to find a doctor, I mean, I know it can be very scary, and I certainly was terrified all those visits for a really long time. It's having to face that you really need to see a specialist. That, I guess, was intimidating for me. Maybe it's intimidating for you. But suffering, for the sake of suffering, there's no reason. There's just no reason. Why are you trying to be a hero? You know what I mean? Like, you're doing something detrimental to yourself, to your health, to your life. And God forbid it's something more serious than, than you think that it is. You need to know. And also, if it's not a migraine, if it's a different kind of headache, there are different kinds of treatments. Now, I have no experience with other kinds of headache disorders, so I'm not going to speak on that. But I know there are different things that you can do for it. And why suffer if you can live the life that you imagine without any pain? I mean, it just seems pointless to me to continue that way. But anywho's, so according to my neurologist, she says there's about 30 to 35 academic headache centers in the country. That's not counting, of course, she says, private practice groups and specialists and other setups. Now, in New York City, there is Montefiore. That's where I go, in the Bronx. NYU, Cornell, Columbia, and Mount Sinai all have headache centers in their facilities. Where they're located, I know a lot of those hospitals own multiple other buildings and setups, so you would have to go to their direct websites for the information, but I recommend doing so. In terms of private practice groups, there is the New York Headache Center and the Manhattan Center for Headache and Neurology. She also suggests that you check out American Headache Society and American Migraine Foundation, in addition to the sites that I recommended last time, in terms of finding a provider in your area. Now, I travel about an hour and a half to get to my doctor, so keep in mind that, the doctor that you need might not be right around the corner, and while that's completely inconvenient, I get it. and their hours are sometimes limited, and there might be a period to wait for new patients. Like I mentioned last time, I had to wait a few months before I could get in and fill out a ton of paperwork ahead of time because they really want to make sure that they're taking patients and they're limited time to get the right kind of patients, to get the right kind of help. So try to have some patience with the process. I know it is not easy, but there is hope out there and there's help out there. And that is the most important thing. Please get the help that you so desperately need, because you can go from not thinking that your life is worth living to really having a life again. And I say that as someone with experience in that. And every day seems to be like a new experience for me. I seem to really be rediscovering what it is to be alive. And, that's something that someone with chronic illness, for me, chronic migraines, you think that you've hit the floor of knowing what you've lost. And you really don't, because when you're not living, you just see in your pain, you just know the obvious things. I'm not leaving my house. I'm not going to work. I'm not going out with friends. I'm whatever. But it's such a deep issue. And what that does to the other aspects of your life, I'm 37. And if I telling you I haven't really lived for 10 years, roughly, I mean, it stunts everything. It stunts the ability to move forward in your life in terms of career, in terms of having your own family, of buying your own house, of all those other things. You're not dating, you're not doing anything because you can barely brush your teeth, you can barely breathe. And so, while it looks like the world has gone by without you, it really actually has. You have just sat in the same space physically, and maybe even sometimes emotionally, because that's all you can really focus on is yourself. And so please, I beg you, it's Migraine Awareness Month. The suicide rate is about 10% of all migraine patients that suffer take their own life because they feel so desperate and have suffered for so long. And, I think it was June 7th, it was Migraine Awareness Day of celebrating the people that we've lost to this illness. And now when you come to neurological diseases and disorders, migraine rates right up on top of being the most debilitating and the most deadly. And deadly, I always worried about having a stroke or an aneurysm or something like that. But really, the largest cause of death in terms of migraines is suicide, because people can't bear to be in pain all of the time and have no life. I mean, when your life is just about pain from one moment to the next, it just devastates me. It just devastates me. And I find it so ironic that it's also Pride Month. And so, of course, that community has suffered suicides and murders and terrible, terrible things. But I see a parallel, and not to be dramatic, but the parallel in not being able to live your life authentically, however you want, in any means possible, and suffering because of it, whether it's physical pain, emotional pain, pain from being ostracized. Pain is pain, the same way love is love. And so we need to really open our hearts and open our minds, first starting with ourselves. Get yourself the help that you need so that you can live a happy, productive life, because otherwise, what are we doing here, right? So that is my update for today. I hope you all have a very migraine-free week, and I will talk to you next time.